call in the middle of the whole deal. All right. Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It's been a minute. Summer's been crazy here in the Bitterroot Valley, so we've been very busy, working diligently on real estate, on construction, on all of the other fun summer events and Fishing, that's the most important one, I think, for Kathie Butts over here. And in the meantime, we've had some major changes happen that took place over the weekend. It's been a long build-up. This is going to be kind of important to not only real estate agents, I think, listening, but also anybody that's going to be affected by the change in the real estate industry, which is going to be buyers and sellers as well. It's going to change kind of everybody's approach to how things work. Although here in Montana, I don't think it's going to change too terribly much because we are already more or less in a good place from my understanding in comparison to other states. But why don't we start from kind of the beginning of where this originated? There was a class action lawsuit.
Let's go back even further.
Okay, we'll start even further back.
Let's go back to the 90s. And in the 90s, in Montana at least, every real estate agent represented the seller. And so that agent that represented the seller also paid a buyer's agent who brought a buyer to the transaction. But everybody represented the seller. No one represented the buyer. It was caveat emptor. It was buyer beware. And so the agents, the realtors as a whole, figured out that this wasn't so fair to the buyers. And so we created buyer agency. And buyers got representation. The sellers still continued to pay for it because all the comps were based on seller-paid compensation to both the agent who brought the buyer and the agent who did the listing, even though they both represented the seller. So it has been like this for at least 30-something years. And now we have a big change. And the big change separates buyers and sellers' representation very firmly. And it creates a mound of new paperwork, which we hope gets reduced to a moundette as we get further and further down the process. Because, oh my gosh, right now it's kind of different. So anyway,
it's a little convoluted. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hope that we do find kind of a happy medium in between this new onslaught of documents that we have to use. It's not too terrible. There's just one or two more, but I think it could be consolidated a little better in the future. But so what happened was, I'm getting an echo here.
Did I start out good?
You did, yeah. No, that was perfect. So what? I can't remember. I should know the states, but Montana was not involved.
It's another M state like Missouri. I think it's Missouri.
I think it's Missouri. Missouri. So there's a class action lawsuit brought by sellers against a few named brokerages and the National Association of Realtors. Mm-hmm. They basically said that there was some antitrust and price fixing going on, that multiple brokerages were talking to each other to set real estate fees at a specific price. And I have never seen documents from those states, so I can't comment on whether or not that's true. But viewing things from the documents that we have here in Montana, we've kind of been doing it the right way for a long time. That was a blank space, always, on our documents. It was, we'll list your property for blank percent or blank flat fee, and we'll also cooperate with a buying broker for blank percent. My personal opinion on this is that there were a lot of new agents coming into the game in 2020 to 2022, and there was a serious lack of proper training. There's a lot of people that saw it as an easy money sort of gig, and were not policed in a way or trained in a way that gave them the ability to clarify, or if they were unethical, just didn't feel the need to clarify certain things to their clients, aka the sellers, who claimed that they were unaware that the percentage they were paying, part of it was going to pay the buyer agency.
Correct. And one of the things that they keep bringing up is that we failed as a group, an entire group of realtors from the United States. We failed as a group to tell sellers and buyers that our compensation is always negotiable. And it has said it in the Montana state forms. I've heard two things. I've heard that there were 17 states that had been doing it right all along, and then I also heard that there were 11 states in the United States that have been doing it right all along. But Montana's always been one of them. So I feel sorry for the agents in other states who don't have a lead-in to how to make all this work. We have some of the most amazing legal minds that work with the Montana Association of Realtors. And they have done a phenomenal job in the past of keeping us out of big trouble. And so they have done a really fine job in a very short period of time to redo the forms that we use. And I think they're on the right path. And I think Ryan's right. Some of it can be consolidated and turned into a multi-use form instead of a specific use form. So we'll see. We'll see how things go as time goes on. But this is a learning period for all of us. And not everyone is going to explain it the same way because everyone has a different opinion. I've seen some realtors that have posted things that I think are wrong, but I've also seen those posts come down. So it's a big learning experience, and today is actually day 2 of using the right forms. I'm going to go show property this afternoon to 2 people I have never met. So I really don't have a relationship with them yet, but I will. So I had to fill out a limited service buyer representation agreement that simply says, hey, guess what? I can show you this property, but I'm not going to give you any advice. And
this is one of the new forms.
This is one of the new forms, and I'm pretty sure that could be rolled right into a buyer representation agreement.
It's kind of a weird one because it says in this form that it works in tandem with the relationship form.
Right.
So even though you're not, even though according to the form you're not representing them and not supposed to be giving them advice, you're still putting this with, and it says it in the document that this goes hand in hand with the relationships in real estate form, which we've had for a long time, which basically is your job description for whichever party you're representing.
Right. What a buyer's going to do for a buyer and what that buyer also has to do for the seller and vice versa. That's what that form says. So this limited service agreement is only good for 3 days. And the point was for when people come out of town who don't really know your area, you can show them around and tour them. They even call this the touring showing agreement. You could tour them around, show them a couple of houses, get to know them, and if you guys like each other, then you can fill out the buyer representation agreement. If you don't like each other, you can just say, we're done, and nobody gets sued. I mean, I think that's what it says, basically.
Yeah, it gives everybody an out, more or less. And it makes it very clear that it's only for this period of time, and you're not getting locked into anything for several months or a year or however long you usually do your buyer-broker agreement. To backtrack for a second on the forms, we have this new form and a couple of other heavily updated
We have the form in front of us.
as well. But to kind of show that how well we were handling things previously in Montana, our listing agreement didn't really change all that much.
Nope.
We had a couple of additional lines that clarified in the document itself that just clearly states that the fees are negotiable, and you don't have to offer a buyer's agent compensation with your listing, and that my favorite part about it is they did include that language that says there are some pitfalls that come along with not offering compensation to the buyer representative.
Right. Pitfalls for the seller.
Pitfalls for the seller, yes, because that is going to be one of the major pitfalls. I think that initially looks really good for the seller because they're like, oh, it's going to save us money, but in my opinion, it's going to be a hard thing for buyers because it's going to make it harder for them to be able to afford to buy a house because now they have to come up with a compensation. If the seller chooses not to pay the buying broker, the buyer themselves have to come up with the compensation for the buyer's representative.
Right. So it could be anything. It could be a combination of the buyers have this much money, and you can put it right in the buy sell. The buyers have this much money they can put towards their agent representation. If the sellers could make up the difference to this percentage, then it's totally negotiated. It's totally negotiated through the buy sell, and it's perfectly fine according to our legal counsel from the state of Montana's Realtor Association.
Nice. Now, the challenging part becomes when you start involving government agencies like FHA and VA loans because they had a clear statement earlier this year that said that they're not going to allow concessions like that to be wrapped into the loan, right?
They did, but they are changing.
Oh, they are changing.
They're changing. They have to.
Yeah, because there's going to be no way, really. I mean, in my opinion, if a seller is unwilling to pay the buyer broker, and the buyer is unable to afford it because let's face it, home prices are a little high,
Whoa.
and mix that with we're at an average interest rate environment, but with the higher prices, it makes it more challenging. I mean, for a VA loan, it might be a little more possible because there's zero down, so you can have an easier time finding that extra money that they would need to pay a buyer broker. But for someone getting an FHA loan,
It's harder.
it's much harder.
It's harder, but it's not. So you have to remember that when we did it the old way, and the seller's agent and the buyer's agent were paid by the sellers, it was just innocuously wrapped into the loan. And so the buyers paid really for their agent representation, but it was part of the loan that they got through the bank.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah. So in that rationale, it's the buyers that always pay for every real estate transaction.
Right.
The buyers pay both sides.
So
When you look at it from that perspective, because yes, the seller is saying we agree to give this percentage of whatever we sell our house for to the real estate brokerages for their work, but it's really the buyer that's paying that because they're the ones fronting the money in the end.
that's correct.
So it's not the seller that's paying anything.
See?
It's just taking a percentage of what they would normally earn from their sale. But it's always the buyer that's willing to pay it,
That's right.
and that's where the money is coming from.
So see how convoluted this is, and it was simplified into a class action lawsuit by attorneys who probably don't get how it actually worked the old way at all.
Who generally take about a third of whatever they earn through a lawsuit anyway, or whatever money is transacted in a lawsuit. They typically take about 30%.
Yeah, they take quite a bit, not way more than realtors do. And I started talking to different professions about what they get paid, people that are paid on commission, like RV dealerships and the people who work in an RV dealership. It is way more than what realtors make. It's phenomenal. And
Yeah, it's like 10% or something, right?
11 is what this
Is
gal told
11
me.
is, yeah.
Yeah. And I get it that an RV is not the same price as a house, but there are RVs that are $300,000 and $400,000 and $500,000 units. So that's just about the price of a house, kind of mostly. But it's crazy because it's a problem that got created because of the need for a lawsuit, and it became a problem that was given to everyone through the National Association of Realtors. And I have mixed feelings. I've always been proud to be able to say that I was a realtor because it means that I've done extra education. It means that I've paid attention to different kinds of real estate agents. I am proud to be a broker. I'm proud to be a broker owner. And I still like the name Realtor because not everyone gets it. But boy, this has really been very hard to take. I, I don't know a better way to say that, but it's weird.
It is a little weird, and I mean, I do have my own opinions about NAR themselves. I mean, I'm relatively new in the industry, and so I haven't had as much experience dealing with them maybe as you have. Uh, but for the amount of money that I pay in my dues, which up until now I have been required to do in order to be a member of the MLS, which is I don't like. I don't like that, in my opinion. I don't like that I have to pay an organization simply to have access to the database in order to do my job. I have to pay a separate organization. I have to pay MLS, and I have to pay NAR, and I have to pay the Bitterroot Valley Board of Realtors.
And the Montana.
And the Montana Association. So there's 4 fees that I have to pay in order to do my job. When really I could just do 1 or 2. When it comes to NAR, though, I'm not seeing quite yet the benefits that I would receive. Just from the news that I hear of what they do and what they've been spending their money on in recent years, it leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, especially when I keep getting text messages from health insurance brokers saying that that is the I hate to say it, but that's the majority of my experience with NAR is that they just sold my data and then paid a bunch of money to make a TV show about buying and selling real estate.
You know, well, you make it hard to say you're wrong, Ryan, because you're right. But I have to go back and think about prior National Association of Realtor Leadership.
Right.
It was very different, and it has changed immensely in the last 5 years, maybe longer. But it was quiet. It was a quiet little change, and it just kind of popped up and reared its ugly head that our leadership isn't leading the same way it used to. And I think that's part of the problem. We have a huge, what's the word I want, political action group that operates in Washington and helps change laws. They help create laws. And for a long time, they had like a really focused approach to what was good for everyone operating with real property, whether it's realtors or appraisers or anybody else connected to this industry. And they did a great job of making it easy to do your work and do your work to the best of your ability. And somewhere along the line, it got lost. That goal got lost and turned into something about money. And anytime a group, their focus becomes something about money, they change. And I think that's what happened.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean they are the largest lobbying group in the United States.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. What is it? What's the PAC called again? I forget now. We just had a fundraiser here recently.
The Realtor Political Action Committee.
RPAC, yeah.
RPAC.
RPAC, yeah. They are the largest lobbying group in the United States. And, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of lobbying groups myself. That's a separate issue, I think. But I think you're right. When organizations start getting focused on only the money, it starts to become a totally different animal.
And maybe it happened differently, but that's what it feels like and looks like to me.
Same. I mean, if it isn't that way, please, NAR, National Association of Realtors, please show me clearly what the benefit is of me paying almost $1,000 a year to be a part of your organization, which I am required to do at this current time in order to do my job.
I know, but they're going to say that you didn't have to become a realtor.
But I have to in order to access the MLS.
I know.
Otherwise, I can't do my job.
I know. I get it.
If that wasn't a requirement for me to access MLS, it might be a different story.
So, buyers. Buyers understand that you may be asked to help pay the commission for your agent, which I guess is a totally fair thing. No matter what happens, you absolutely have the right to negotiate what that's going to be between you and the sellers, between you and your agent, between the agent and the seller's agent. You always have the right to negotiate every single part of your purchase, including commissions, which we're supposed to call compensation now. So I keep blowing it and calling it commissions, but it's compensation.
We'll just call it the C word.
Yeah. So that's, no, I'm not going there. And sellers, the same thing holds true for you. You have absolutely the right to negotiate who you're paying a commission to, how much you're paying, and you have every right, both of you, sellers and buyers, to find out what value your real estate agent brings to your table. And that's going to be a very difficult thing for some agents.
And that's why I think this is in a way kind of a good thing. This is where the positive side of this is coming through, because it's going to force real estate agents to be more proactive in showing their value. I think it's been too easy for too long for certain people to skirt under the radar in a way and just have an easy go at things. And now people are going to have to actually show that you're paying me this percentage.
Because
this
I
is,
do this.
and this is why it's worth your money to pay me to do this, because of here's the skills that I bring to the table. Here's what I can do for you. And this is why you need me in this transaction.
Yep, and so start asking. When you have a meeting with a buyer or a seller agent, depending on what you're doing, if you're going to list your property, you probably have at least an hour-long meeting with that realtor to talk about this. If you're a buyer, exactly the same thing. You can go look at things for 3 days, but then you're going to have to sit down and do a real buyer representation agreement. And there's no we can do it laters. It has to be done at specific times in a transaction. So nobody's getting out of this without a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears, I think.
Yeah, because previously you kind of fly by the seat of your pants and be like, all right, I'll show you all these properties, and then when we come to writing the contract, then we'll sign all the forms. Now it's required. I mean, it's always been kind of required, but now it's definitely clearly stated that before an agent shows a potential client a property, they need to have at least this limited service buyer representative agreement or a full-on buyer broker representation agreement
Correct.
before they even step through that door.
So if you've got an agent who says, no, I don't need you to sign anything, well, that's a red flag for you then. Because now you do. So the buy-sell is another pointer about how good Montana has done and about our legal advice that we've gotten over the years from the attorneys that help the Montana Association of Realtors. The buy-sell barely changed. And it added language and it made it easier and it changed a few things, but that's it. So there weren't any brand new agreements that were huge. This limited service agreement is one of them, but otherwise most of our forms just were tweaked and just not very much because they've always been correct.
Yeah, it was mostly just adding some language to further clarify the state of things.
Right.
And that's it. It wasn't any major changes of like now instead of having a line that says your compensation is this instead of this, it was just like this has and always has been, this is and has always been negotiable.
Right.
And that's pretty much was all that was added to the listing agreement. And the buy sell now includes lines about representation.
Yep.
Also.
So the buy-sell came up with a line that says the buyer's not represented by an agent, and it also has a line that says the seller's not represented by an agent. So I figured that probably comes around if it's a for sale by owner transaction. That seems the most likely to me, but who knows what we'll discover as we go through the next few years using these new forms.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, I think.
So it's different, it's new, it's weird, but it's not the end of the world.
No. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen, honestly. I think a lot of this is good. There's a little bit of convoluted stuff happening. The most interesting thing about this whole situation is the removal of buyer representative compensation from the MLS, so you can't actively see what you would potentially be paid as a buyer's representative for selling a particular house. It's not available on the MLS anymore, but it's still, you can put it anywhere else.
But you can't get too crafty.
Well, you just can't. Yeah, you can't put it anywhere on the MLS. You can allude to it on the MLS.
Correct.
But you can have it on your website. You can have it at the residence itself. You can have it on social media. You can scream it from the rooftops.
You can put it on your sign.
You can put it on your sign.
According to the legal advice we got the other day, you can put it on your sign.
Yeah, the only stipulation was it's no longer available to be seen on the MLS.
So, I did read something yesterday that said that they would not accept pictures where you've carefully mowed your front lawn and then you have your offer of compensation in the front lawn with the mowing being a different direction. You can't do that. You can't do crafty little things like that, but I can call any other agent and say, what are you offering a buyer's agent? And they should share with me the broker-to-broker agreement that's now part of the paperwork also. And so it's just a matter of maybe, and it's a good thing, matter of realtors talking more often to other realtors.
Yeah.
And being as upfront as possible right from the get-go. And no more sneaky stuff. So
It just adds an extra step, but, it'll be interesting. Yeah, that we have to go through that other step now. But, for the most interesting part is going to be seeing how sellers react to this, I think. Even though we've clearly stated in the past that here in Montana, at least, that all of these fees are fully negotiable, but what they're going to do with that information. And the other part is, now that we don't see what a particular listing is offering compensation for the buyer side representation, how that's going to affect pricing on MLS, because that's always been wrapped into our CMAs. We've known what the percentage is, but now we won't. The whole idea behind this from a certain aspect of people was that it's going to be saving buyers money.
right.
But the more we look into this, the more I'm having difficulty seeing how that's the truth and how it actually will save buyers money.
Well, and I was reading yesterday in an article on Inman Connect or Inman News or one of the Inmans, and because there's a pile of those, and they were saying that the prices of commissions and the prices of homes will come down as a result of this, and I don't see that happening.
I don't either. I mean, as a buyer representative, I'm still going to. I'm going to have my value proposition, and I am worth this much. I do this work. These are my skills. This is what I bring to the table, and this is what I will get paid. This is what I typically get paid, and this is what I deserve to get paid for the work that I do.
If you don't want to pay me, don't hire me.
Precisely. And then if you I think we're going to start seeing some fall off of agents because
They won't know how to say it.
they're either not going to know how to say it, or they're going to say, I'm going to work for this smaller amount of money, And well, in a lot of cases, you get what you pay for.
Yep. And buyers, now how was I going to say this? Buyers have the opportunity to tell an agent, we don't want to see any houses that are offering zero representation to a buyer's agent.
Because they're not going to be able to afford it otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So sellers are really going to want to consider the ramifications of the fact that buyers can say, no, we don't want to see those houses. And agents should actually make sure that they are saying, this is what you're saying no to. Come here and look at this on the MLS because you're saying no to this house, which otherwise looks perfect for you.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be a way to negotiate a commission in an offer that you make. So maybe instead of cutting an offer down by a couple percent, maybe that becomes the compensation that you can pay. So don't discount anything and keep everything open to negotiations. And agents, you make sure and you tell the agent on the other side of your transaction that this is open for negotiation. And I think no one will have a problem that way. I think that's the thing we have to say over and over and over. It's negotiable. It's negotiable. It's negotiable. Be open to it.
Yes. But I don't think it's going to drop prices
I don't
the
either.
way that a lot of people are talking about it. I mean, we're not going to see an additional 2, 3, 4% drop in home prices simply because of this.
No. And real estate's always gone up and down and up and down and up and down. And if you've been in it long enough, then you've seen the ups and the downs, and you remember the 1990s, and you remember the 2008s, and you remember all the pieces and parts that have been good and bad. And so we have had three years of an amazing market. So we've had 3 years of brand new agents popping right in, and it was easy peasy pickings. And anybody could get $1 million listing. Anybody. And it used to be that was reserved for only the best realtors that had been around the longest and had a great track record. So things are going to change, and it's going to revert back to the way it was, because that's what it always does. It goes and then it reverts itself back. And that's when we lose a lot of new agents. And I really hope the new agents that get it and that feel really comfortable with it are going to just roll, and they're just going to keep going, because obviously I'm not going to be a realtor forever. And so we need new agents that get it to stay. And we really do. And learn it and do it and practice it, and never forget to say everything's negotiable, and you'll be awesome. Whatever year you're in, if you're in year 1, by year 5 you're going to be the bomb. So stay.
I think that's the true benefit of this whole change, is that it's in the end it's going to make the industry better, because it's now slightly more challenging to do things. To do things the right way. There's less incentive to do things by skirting the rules, which I think
That helps.
Yeah.
That helps.
Which I think it's harder to skirt the rules now, which I think the previous 4 years that was happening a little too often. And it's really going to create some refinement in the agents that are coming in and that have been here. The fact that we're going to have less realtors, real estate agents, as a result of this, is a good thing. We need to separate the wheat from the chaff in a way.
There's always been 1 or 2 or 4 or 5, however many people are in your association, agents out there who would take a commission and take the lion's share of it for the selling agent. And since we never actually had an MLS that said, here's what the selling agent's keeping for themselves and here's what they're offering the buyer's agent, that's always been a big blank unknown. And so, it doesn't always get split up even, Stephen. And I wish the first step to this would have been that both agents' compensation had to have been on the form. And that would have made a big difference, I think. But it didn't happen. So this is the way we're going now.
Like on MLS itself?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you could see what the other person, what the selling agent was keeping because they started the process. And so now they're still starting the process. So it's going to be kind of an interesting thing to see if compensation goes up
Mm-hmm.
because sellers are wanting to sell, especially this time of year. If you're getting in the market this time of year, you're not saying, oh, I have time. You're saying, I need to get this sold for whatever reason. This just happens. As soon as summer starts to end and fall starts, there are sellers out there who are saying, oh my God, I got to get this sold.
Yeah, we got to get out of here before winter.
Yeah, and this is going to be a nasty winter, so guess what?
Yeah.
So anyway, I wish we could have started it that way so that realtors were more upfront with each other on the MLS and buyers could have seen it and sellers could have seen it. And it would have made things really simple. But we couldn't do it that way, so we're doing it the hard way.
I mean, we could always kind of assume, though, I mean, it's not completely accurate, but we could always assume kind of what the listing agent was keeping. Because for the most part, you're seeing listings being taken between 5 and 6%. And when we could see on the MLS what the buyer representative would take, it's usually 2 to 2.5%. So you could assume that the listing agent is taking half to more, and the buyer's agent is taking half to less. Because you'll see a range between like 2 and 3% for buyer compensation, and from that you can assume that it was either a 6% listing or a 5% listing, maybe
But
even a 4%
never
listing.
assume, you know what that means.
Yeah, and never assume. But I mean, just using,
Right.
You're just kind of judging on where the percentages are and what we know things typically, what the listing percentage typically is.
Right.
Not set. What typically is, not what is.
Right.
Not what is
Because
set.
everything's negotiable and it always has been.
That's right. So
Right?
this whole thing of 6% listings are gone.
That's not true.
That's not true. It never was a thing, at least here in Montana.
That's right.
We try to push for individually. We make that value proposition that we're going to list your home for this price, and the brokerage will take X percent.
So sellers, this is why you may want to offer compensation to a buyer's agent that exceeds what you would have done had you not realized that when they call your agent and say, what are you offering for buyer's agency? If that agent has to say 0, that likely that property is going to get taken off the showing list for a buyer who can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
For buyers who can afford it, good on you because that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been many arguments on both cases of what agents should split it and how they should split it. From the listing side, saying that you're keeping more, it's because you procured the listing. You're also fronting all the money for the advertising. But then at the other hand, working with buyers, you have a much longer timeline most often. And it can, a listing you can typically sell, I think what is the average time of market, like 90 days now at the moment. So you have 3 months.
To make good on what your investment
Yes,
is.
whereas when you're working with a buyer, it can be up to 2 years in some
3,
cases.
4.
3 years. It can be a long time of constantly reaching out to this person, sending them stuff, spending your time to keep them in the loop, to keep them informed, to find out what's happening with them, and then when they come to a location or if they're already here, when you go out on property tours, this kind of thing, that's more of your time, more money spent on fuel, maybe you have a lunch or something. Like there's all of these other things over a longer period of time as well. And so at the especially when you factor in inflation, if you start working with a buyer in year one, and then it's year three when you finally sell a house, but you still make the same percentage on that transaction, you could end up making much less money than the listing agent,
Or much more.
or much more. Also, that's the case too, depending on the environment. So it's hard to say what's
Yep.
going to happen, but there's arguments for both sides on what commission splits should be, or how they should be split anyway.
So we took a totally confusing topic, and we made you more confused.
Which
Sorry.
is why. Well, we're just getting into the weeds now and talking about the finer points of
Yep.
it, but I think that's also one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about this industry is there's a lot more to this gig than
Right.
I think the majority of the public understands. I think there's a huge, and it's not the fault of the clients when I say this, but I think there's a lot of ignorance in terms of what we do and how our job functions,
Right.
and how we earn our money, and why things are the way that they are. Because there's a lot of, and I'm hoping that what happens with these new buyer forms is that it clarifies on their side also kind of what our job is and how it works, because there's been a lot of cases over the last, I'm sure this has been kind of the norm in the industry, but a lot in recent years where, a buyer will reach out to an agent, they'll go look at a couple houses, and then, this is partly to do with the availability of listings online through Zillow and Redfin and that kind of stuff where people can see things. And so they'll reach out, even though they'll have worked, they'll have contacted a buyer's agent previously, gone on a couple of showings, and then they'll reach out to, they'll see a listing online and they'll reach out to the listing agent, and then they'll start working with the listing agent. And the buyer who showed them, X amount of properties for 6 months, all of a sudden loses out on all the hard work they did because the buyer doesn't understand, I think.
Right.
I don't think they understand what our role is, and also the benefit of working with a buyer's agent to buy a home instead of going through the listing agent.
Right.
Despite the fact the listing agent may say, "Oh, well, we'll, save you X percent of money," but that's not necessarily true, because they'll cut their commission percentage maybe a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily save you any money in the end.
Nope. It doesn't.
Because it's the buyer or the listing agent's duty is to the seller, and they're going to negotiate on behalf of the seller. When they sign up to work with the seller, they say, "My job is to represent you, and it's to get you the most money for your house in the quickest amount of time possible." Whereas the buyer's agent is supposed to is negotiating on behalf of the buyer, and my job is to get you the best price for a house that you want. So if a buyer comes to me as the selling agent, I know there's a dual agency thing, but
So here's a good rule of thumb. If you're a seller, never tell your agent the least amount you're willing to take for your property. If you're a buyer, never tell your buyer's agent the most you're willing to pay. And then you're sitting pretty.
yeah, then it removes
No problems.
a problem. But at the same time, yeah, you have to make sure you're working with a highly ethical person that you can really trust if you're going into dual agency, if they're going to be representing both parties.
Correct.
That's the key, and that's kind of the hard thing for, I think, many people to suss out, is that, yeah, you can work with a listing agent. They may tell you that they're going to save you X amount of money, but at the same time, they're also telling their listing client that, hey, I'm going to get you the most I can for this.
Right. You can't do both.
Yeah, you can't you can't represent both parties and tell one you're getting them the most amount, and then and tell the other one you're going to get the lowest price possible.
No, you can't do that. But you can say, I'm going to get you the best deal possible for both parties. Because real estate really should be win-win, not someone has to lose. It should be everybody gets to win.
Yeah, I think there's been an approach that this is a zero-sum game.
Correct.
And, I mean, we're not buying cars here.
No, we're not.
We're selling cars, rather, in this
No.
case.
No, we're like buying the thing that holds our family.
Buying the thing that holds the family. We're buying our slice of the American dream. I mean, this is something that is incredible to the fabric of American society, I think, honestly.
Yep.
When you take a look at how things work globally and the percentage of people that own property and when you look at other countries, it's not a lot of people own things.
No,
Not a lot of
they
people
don't.
own real property.
No.
You go to any country in Europe, there's a slim percentage of people that actually own real property.
Let alone big refrigerators. They don't own those either.
Well, you can walk to the grocery store over there.
Yeah.
Here it's a little more challenging.
Yes, it is. And it's not a superstore over there.
Not quite. There's a few, but yeah, it's
Very
not
many.
not like here where you got Costco's and you need all that room to stick stuff.
You need 2 freezers.
Yeah, because you got that elk, you got.
I know. So, I think things are going to work out just fine. I think that the forms are going to continue to change for at least a year, maybe 2, while we figure out what works and what doesn't work, and we talk to our various and assorted associations. But I think in the end, I don't want to say it's not going to make much difference, but I don't think it's going to make like earth-shattering differences. I think
No.
they're all overcomable. I think it'll work out just perfect. And if you're a buyer or a seller, your patience is going to be appreciated while people learn how to use these forms. It doesn't matter who your agent is. It just doesn't. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah, in the end, I think it's going to be there's a bit of a learning curve, but once we all come to grips with the new flow of things, it's going to be a huge benefit to the real estate industry as a whole, people buying and people selling. I think there's a couple of extra steps that we need to take now, but I think that helps clarify more clearly our role in things. And it makes us be more clear about our role in things.
Right. So if you're talking to an agent and you don't understand it, ask again. That's all I could say. Just keep asking till you get it.
And if they are able to clarify things, then maybe
they're not the realtor for you.
Yeah, maybe it's time to find someone else.
Yeah, you can call me or Ryan. We got it.
There you go. I think that's a good point to end it. There you go.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully this was an informative little session for everyone. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. Exit Realty Bitterroot Valley. My name is Ryan Holmes, and also Kathie Butts, our broker owner. Follow the link on my profile here and, get in touch. We're happy to explain things and help you understand.
And look for little tidbits of this in Reels on Facebook, my Facebook, because Ryan's going to help me with that.
There you go.
All right.
All right. Bye, everybody.